Empire. Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media. That's A-M-P-I-R-E. You know it's always much appreciated when you tune in. And of course, you can read my work on ESPN.com. Today, I'm joined by Michael Phillips from the Richmond Times Dispatch. We get into a lot of topics. We talk about the ownership situation. We talk about on-field stuff. So it's not just about who the next owner is, et cetera, because it's really hard to dive into that completely because there's still some things we don't know. Who the mystery bidder is, all I know is I was told he's very wealthy. How wealthy do you have to be when you have other billionaires and you're not describing them that way, but you're describing this guy this way, but they're going to keep that person very, very private. So Michael and I will get into all that. And, there's still a looming presence of Jeff Bezos, but until he makes a bid, there's nothing there. I think his name gets used to try to drive up the price, which should tell you something. So anyway, we'll get into all that and we'll get into, again, on-field stuff. So before I get there, just a couple things. The stadium talk, there's nothing new there. And we'll get into some stadium talk as well. The one thing I will say is the more people I talk to, the more obstacles it seems that RFK would have for a team to return to the city. It's not just about, if Jeff Bezos came in, he could throw him $1 billion and get it built down there. I don't think that's the case. So I do think there's a lot of hurdles there, regardless of who owns a team. It's back in play if whoever buys it instead of Snyder. But I'd say every place is back in play because a lot of people didn't want to really do business with them until this situation was resolved. So, but I do think there will be, and I've talked about the obstacles before, and there's, just a few things. Michael and I get into some of that. But just suffice to say, to me, if I had to guess right now with that, it would be a couple sites in Maryland or Loudoun County. That's the only place to me in Virginia that I think that they could get something done. They're not going to go to Prince William. Anyway, so the last thing is RG3 came out last week on the Rich Eisen show and talked about being excited for a possible role with the Josh Harris group. What I know is it is not as a limited partner. So he wasn't putting any money in there to join the group that way. People there that I talked to weren't sure really what that was, but it certainly seems that Robert has talked to some people about doing something if indeed the Harris group wins the bidding. So there you go. But again, it wouldn't be as limited partner. Last thing is Hard Knocks. So there are 4 teams right now that could be up for Hard Knocks. It's Jets, the Bears, the Saints, and the Commanders. I do know there are people here who would love to be the team chosen because they want to show the football nation how things have changed over the last couple of years for them, but also moving forward, what it could look like here with a new owner. So that would require them to have a new owner in place, and that would mean somebody would be approved at the May meetings. Now, I don't know for sure if that's going to be at the May meetings. That would still be where I would guess. But if they're going to go to if they would be on Hard Knocks, as again, I know there's some people here who would love that because they really do want to show, moving once the Snyder situation resolved, what it looks like with it going forward. So, but the problem is then you also have, would you rather have if you're Hard Knocks, would you rather have Sam Howell or Aaron Rodgers in New York? You have Carr with the Saints, you have Justin Fields in Chicago. So I think there's other compelling reasons for other teams, but I do believe there are going to be some people here pushing the league to try and get it for them. Don't know if they'll be successful or not, but that's the sense I've gotten. Anyway, that's it from me. So here's my conversation with Michael Phillips from the Richmond Times Dispatch.
Hey, what's up, Outkick fans? I'm Kurt Schilling. You know me as a 3-time World Series champion. I'm joining Outkick to bring you a brand new baseball show where we talk about everything, but only baseball. And you should subscribe to the podcast on Outkick's YouTube and search for the podcast exclusively on Spotify.
Hi, I'm Ryan Reynolds. As owner of Mint Mobile, I couldn't wait to make my first commercial for Spotify listeners. I thought, I'll tell them to go to mintmobile.com/Spotify to get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Then I thought, they'll never believe the owner bragging, so I'll bring on a real Mint customer who knows it's premium wireless for just $15 a month. Then I thought, how will they know it's not just me acting as a customer? Then I thought, what if they don't think I'm a good enough actor to play a customer? Then I cried and went to bed the end.
New activation and upfront payment for 3-month plan required. Taxes and fees extra. Additional restrictions apply. See mintmobile.com for full terms.
Did you know the largest ropes course and zipline park in the country is right here in the DMV? Located in the heart of Montgomery County, the Adventure Park at Sandy Spring combines climbing and ziplining to create an aerial obstacle course unlike any other. With challenges anywhere from 10 to 75 feet in the air, there is something for all skill levels. Looking for some family time or the perfect date night before football season starts? You can even climb and zip line under the stars. Would you rather keep your feet on the ground? Give axe throwing a try. With their projector systems, you can throw at traditional targets, play tic-tac-toe, connect four, or even hunt zombies. Listeners of this show can get $5 off any ticket by entering the code KEIM23DC at checkout. That's KEIM, K-E-I-M 23DC. So there you have it, folks. Climbing, ziplining, axes, food, and bonfires right in your backyard. The weather is warming up, so it's the perfect time to head outside and join the adventure at www.theadventurepark.com. That's www.theadventurepark.com and enter promo code KEIM23DC. We just get back. Well, I guess by the time this comes out, it'll be almost a week since we got back from the owners' meetings in Phoenix. But, there's still some things that haven't been, I don't think, maybe discussed enough. Some of that is we're obviously approaching the end of this tenure. When it is, who the hell knows at this point? Yeah. But, yeah, you're laughing because nobody knows.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great summary of everything we learned in Phoenix right there.
Correct.
Throw your hands up. Who knows?
But you did have a column the other day, and I want to get into the sense of excitement in the organization based on the sale. But where Snyder's at the end here, and what was clear to you when you walked away from Phoenix about that situation?
Yeah, I feel like it's both a massive piece of news, and it's okay to roll your eyes at it when I say Dan Snyder is going to sell the team, right. And he's going to do it, if not like tomorrow, very soon. And I feel like people are sleeping on that piece of news. Like people are waiting for the actual sale to get excited, but we got enough breadcrumbs here. I mean, you had, what I wrote at Richmond.com was you split it up between the old guard and the new guard of the NFL. The old guard, the Maras, the Rooneys, Irsay's in that group. And they just don't appreciate Dan at this point. Dan's been rubbing them the wrong way. He's had the ESPN comments about everybody hates each other. For them, the meeting is a big family reunion. Their kids are playing by the pool, running around. They view this as a tight-knit group, and they're tired of him. Then you got the new group. Of course, obviously, Jerry Jones is the face of that. Your Teppers, your Waltons, the new money they're here. They spent a lot of money, and they're ready to make a lot of money. Right. This is a business for them. And, Jerry is friends with Dan, and I thought Jerry Jones's comments were probably as close to kind as Dan was going to find this week. Because, look, I know Dan differently than you guys. I think he's a good guy. But the but was, he's not making any money for us. This is a profit-driven enterprise. His team is not making any money. They're dragging us down. They're in Washington, D.C., a market that should be making money. We got to make some money here. And so they're ready to move on, too.
It's funny though, it's I think Dan has rubbed some of those guys the wrong way for a long time. So, yeah. But it was funny with Irsay how he would go back to Jack Kent Cooke when we were talking to him and telling some Jack Kent Cooke stories, and I think it's basically an implication like this is what I miss. And the other thing too, Michael, that struck me is how much they miss the excitement in the Washington market, because I think that came up and I think it was a Jerry who called it a national treasure, and Irsay, more than a few owners would talk about what it meant for them to go to RFK and the memories they had going there and what football meant to the DC area, and not just the DC area, but Redskin Washington fans.
Yeah, for the fans, they miss that. They miss the excitement, obviously, we talked to the writers from the other teams and some of the coaches from the other teams, and they tell you the same thing. We go there and there's no juice, and it's sitting fans, and it's just, especially for the AFC people who come here on the 8-year cycle,
right?
They don't understand because, the last time they came here may have been RG3 and when there was still old juice in the stadium, I came there a couple of years ago and I was just really stunned that nobody was there. And, it was sad. It's like visiting a mall now, all these malls that are decaying, where's the Orange Julius?
Right.
There's nothing going on there. I think gradually everybody's kind of coming to realize that. Now, the part 2 of that is a little more self-serving, and that is DC is a company town. The company is running the country. That's the company in DC. And when people in DC have a cynical or negative view towards the NFL, that shows in legislation. That shows in things like antitrust exemptions, congressional inquiries. That's a good market to keep happy. And beyond that, you want a great showpiece stadium, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that, people can say, hey, the NFL, that's a civic pillar, the NFL stadium, that's an important part of the fabric of a city. And that influences the sort of decisions that get made. And, you think about the antitrust exemption right now, bans them from playing on Fridays and Saturdays during the fall. That's something they want to change. And if you got a bunch of salty people walking around DC thinking the NFL's not relevant anymore, it's not going to change.
Right. And yeah, that's a good point. And I think the other, Ian, kind of staying on the line, it is why this franchise is going to fetch $6+ billion, because it is because of where it's located and because the history of it. And despite the name change, the history remains in this city with this franchise. And I think that's one of the things I think that owners really want to get back to that. And, it's funny because over the years, they're like, why would they want Snyder to leave? Because, they can beat them all the time. Well, first of all, they're not 4-13 or 4-12 every year. So, the other thing is billionaires like to make money, and they know that this hurts their product, right?
They're leaving money on the table. Every day he owns the team, they're leaving money on the table. And the other thing with regard to the sale is there are legitimate bidders. And there's that counter push of is it a real offer? Is it not a real offer? It's a real enough offer. And certainly from the Harris Group, it's a real enough offer that, these guys can go to Dan and say, we understand you have an offer on the table. It's time to take care of business.
Right. So let's switch to the other thing that I think, you could sense there. And when you talk to people within the organization, Jason Wright, Ron Rivera, there is an excitement about the light at the end of the tunnel after this situation. They'll refer to the last 2.5 years, or for Ron, the last 3 years, what they've had to deal with and trying to, get for on the business side, the sponsorships, the this, the that. There's a genuine, I think, excitement. Agreed? Or what do you think?
Ron, I think for Ron, it's the opportunity to, really go full bore into this crucial year for him. Now, I think Ron obviously understands it's make the playoffs or get fired this year, but I think he's okay with that, and he understands that, and he understands what it means to be the guy helping navigate this transition. I think for Jason Wright, I'm sure he told you as well, but in his conversation with me, he said, look, as soon as this happens, we are going to see a surge in attendance and a surge in revenue. And they believe that. They believe that going into this season with new ownership, attendance will rise and sponsorships will rise because people will want to get on board with the new thing. I'm going to be honest with you, John. I think he's right. I think there will be, if not a permanent surge, I think people are going to go out there and be like, okay, it is still FedEx Field. There's only so much these guys are going to be able to do with it. The new stadium, to me, will be the official launch of the new era, the official, we've turned a corner, here we go. But I think there's going to be a little bump this year, a little excitement, and I think it will absolutely reflect in attendance.
They absolutely believe it. And, it's funny, though, because what they won't say is, well, once Dan is gone as well, they didn't want to do it because they didn't want to be associated with the brand. Well, the brand was Dan. Let's be real. Budweiser drops these guys. Now, they gave some reasons, and I know they dropped some other teams in other sports, but it was because they didn't want to be associated with this team, and this team meant Dan Snyder, and so I think but there is the reality that they feel like they can sell more suites, they can, get more sponsorships, which then you can reinvest in the organization. So when you talk to them about things that they can do moving forward, it starts with getting those things done. And you have to win. Like if you ask them what's the top priority, it's you got to win. But there is that excitement.
Man, and you go back to, it's funny, all the little things that could have turned it along the way. And you say, if the Virginia legislature approves the stadium last year, we're probably not going through this. If the team, if that Kirk Cousins year, if they beat the Giants and make the playoffs and Bruce signs Kirk long-term and they make a couple playoffs, maybe none of this happens because there's just so much excitement around the team and the performance, but it's that full compilation of everything. Like, sure, they've had some winning records. Sure, they've hovered around 500, but there's been no real excitement in the market for a very, very long time.
Robert, I mean, you go back there. If Robert doesn't get hurt, despite all the issues with the, that if Robert doesn't get hurt, where are we at? But he, I mean, there's a lot of, you're right. There's all those what ifs. I mean, and I think for the fan base, when that happens, you lose that when it keeps going, like when you keep having those symbols of hope that don't pan out, it adds up.
And your other big storyline this week was Lamar Jackson, obviously.
Right.
And that's why people keep why wouldn't Lamar Jackson go to the crazy? I mean, we were sitting there with Ron Rivera, and 2-3 national reporters came over during that time, like, but Lamar Jackson, and Ron was no, and they couldn't understand. People don't understand. Why not? You're the Commanders. He's Lamar Jackson. People just don't know, why wouldn't you want Lamar Jackson? But we've been burned one too many times.
Well, and I went over this, like I had to live stream the other night. Kind of, it's more the financial and like how many guys you'd have to cut, and it's legit. Like it's because the way they plan because the way the roster is, But the other thing that I always say, like, why don't you go back to Baltimore and say, why is he not re-signed yet? Like he's their guy. Could you imagine if he was this team's property right now and in this situation? The heat would be on them, not on the teams trying to get him or not getting him.
Yeah, and I don't think the Ravens are handling this correctly, right. But I think from a straight fiscal standpoint, it's a very smart move to do this because I don't think any team's going to get serious about signing Lamar Jackson because they know any viable deal, the Ravens are going to match. And you just did their negotiating for you. But because of that, it creates this appearance that the market is dampened, so the Ravens can now go to him. Nobody else is interested. Guess you better sign with us. I don't know that that's good business, but you could probably find some hedge fund people who would tell you like they're maximizing their dollar there or whatever.
Yeah, and what people I don't know if they realize that if you make an offer to him, he signs it, you have to have the cap space for that period of time where he is under your, sign that offer sheet. So if the Ravens take 5 days a match, you are making all sorts of moves, cutting guys, doing this, doing that, to just get the offer sheet signed. And then the Ravens are going to keep them. So it just, and again, I don't want to spend too much time. I'm so tired of talking about Lamar because the guy's a fantastic player. Like I'd love, who wouldn't want to watch him play every week? It's just, but it is what it is, man. But you're right. Like, and the other thing I was wondering too, once the ownership changes, and only fans can answer this because I don't really know, but I wonder how much, I hate to use PTSD because that's a real thing, but in a sports PTSD format, how long it takes to move past the past, because there have been so many issues like, are you going to, can you trust that it's going to be better, this and that? Can you, it's different, but I wonder how fast they can move past. And if you win, it'll be quick.
And what's interesting is you look at recent sports ownership changes, and these are billionaires who come in, they throw their billions at it, and then they get itchy. They get in. The guy buys the Phoenix Suns, and then like the next morning trades all his draft picks in perpetuity for Kevin Durant. Like David Tepper buys the Carolina Panthers, and they just is going wild here. I got to have the number 1 draft pick. The Waltons buy the Broncos. Russell Wilson, $300 million. Sean Payton, all the hundreds of you buy a team, you get antsy. What's funny is the measure of success here is probably going to be the opposite because of everything we've seen and everything we've experienced. I don't think fans are looking for an owner to come in and say, you want a Lamar Jackson? Here's a check. You can have a Lamar Jackson. I think they want to see a good, solid GM hired, a good coach, underneath him, and it could be Ron if Ron has a successful year this year. I've kind of come to peace with the fact that it's probably not going to be Ron coaching this team in 2024, but if it is, all the better. And, you have a roster that's really well set up for that, in that you're going to have natural juice this year on the ownership change, on people being excited. It's the perfect year to audition Sam Howell to try some of these guys and have the chance to build the way you want to build it going forward.
Yeah, and I want to get to the roster in a minute because I do think that's an important part of this. But I think it's also sticking with that, and talking to some people too, like what should they do for, like, how would you handle it coming in? I was talking to somebody, and when Dan came in, he was a fan and he reacted like a fan. As an owner, which you can't do. You can't go out like, oh, Barry Sanders is going to retire. Get him. I want him. And it's like, he was told we can't do that. Doesn't matter. Go get him. Now they didn't get him, but it was the impetuousness of a wealthy fan who owns a team now. And no offense to fans, I wouldn't want myself in charge of a franchise either, but you can't think like that. You have to think differently. And that's where a guy like Josh Harris, if he gets it, has the experience as an owner to know how you handle it as an owner. And that because you don't know, it's so different than business that you don't know. There's a track record there that we do know how he handles things. So, but that is, you have to treat it. You can't go in there guns a-blazing. You have to set it up right.
It's so hard to grade an owner, right? Like if you line up 10 Capitals fans and you say, what do you think of Ted Leonsis as an owner? I think you get a favorable rating. They'll say, hey, Ted Leonsis, man, he kept Ovi and Backstrom here. We won a Stanley Cup, a very fun game day experience. I like Ted Leonsis. And then if we put 10 Wizards fans in a room and we say, what do you think about Ted Leonsis as an owner? He stinks. He's the worst. That all that team does is lose. He gave too much money on long-term deals. What a terrible owner. He's not, games have no juice. So you can get such different opinions on the same guy, but I think that why people are responding to Josh Harris, and to your point, I think you're absolutely right, that he has experience, he has this before, he's not walking in, and this is nothing personal against, I'm not even going to say it, our Canadian Greek friend.
Apostolopoulos. And I'm sorry, here's my joke, it's Steve. But it's Apostolopoulos.
I was on Ben Standing's podcast the other day. I said he would have the best podcast in that era because he'd be the only one with enough time to say the name enough times during the episode. He would be new though. He's new. It's new money. It's new to sports. And you just don't know. These are unknowns. And that was, if the Bezos excitement is he could buy you a new stadium just by cutting a check and it would be awesome. To me, the Harris excitement is this is a group that runs sports teams at the highest level. Like the NFL is big, but the Premier League is bigger globally. Like this dude is running a Premier League soccer team. This is not too big of a spotlight for him.
And there's also the mystery guy who is not Bezos, but there's still that mystery guy. And somebody described him to me as very wealthy. I'm like, how much money does he have to have if you don't use that to describe these other guys? Like, Josh Harris is, he's got some billions, but he's not like this guy. But so I don't know who that is. They're being very protective of his identity.
It's mystery bitter. It's mystery bitter Beth Bezos. He's got a little mustache coming in.
Yeah, that would be, God, what a prank that would be. If he shows up in like this really bad looking fake wig and, and he, on the tour and he kind of disguises his voice like, oh, I love this stadium. Yes, that would be a good bit. And he gets it on TikTok. Maybe it's a security guard at the park.
Absolutely. There you go. I mean, look, there's the mystery bit, or there's other people. I think that's why I feel confident saying, like, I don't know that this thing ends tomorrow, but I do know this thing's going to end, and this thing's going to end with the football team.
Yeah, it hasn't been if, it's when. And we moved past the if pretty early on, I think, to the when part. And it was just a matter, at that point. So what about, all right, so now the effect, the stadium. Prince William will be out, right?
I think Maryland comes to the table as a strong early contender in the new stadium hunt. And without going too deep into it, there was, if not bad blood both ways. Dan Snyder felt aggrieved towards the Maryland governor's office towards the end there. Justified or unjustified, whatever. Bottom line was, he wasn't doing business with them. I think they come right back into the picture, especially in a Harris Rails scenario. You got two Marylanders taking over the team. I think they're absolutely back at the table. So here's how I break this down on RFK, John. Everybody wants RFK. Nobody's disputing that. Nobody's saying anything other than RFK would be the absolute best site for the team. These guys are about to drop $6 billion on a football team. And even for rich people, that's rich. That's a lot of money. At RFK, that's national parkland. You're not going to get to build the Village. It's not a real estate play. It's not a restaurant play. It's not a hotel and office and condo play. It's a football stadium play. And you can make money building a football stadium. Like, those are profitable enterprises. But if you look at the amount of money being made, Patriot Place, we were just in Arizona, Glendale, what they've done with their stadium around it. There's hotels with water parks that stay there. The Atlanta Braves are an example Jason Wright throws out all the time. You look at the Battery, what they've done down there. These are not stadium plays anymore. Barclays Center, obviously a very famous example where they eminent domain land in New York City, and the developer ends up developing more in the stadium around it. These are not stadium plays anymore. These are real estate plays. I had one more, the Bears, obviously, what they're doing coming out of the city and going into Arlington. These are real estate plays and real estate transactions. The quickest way to make your $6 billion back is not $75 at a time by charging tickets or by selling jerseys. It's by making a giant real estate play in one of the nation's largest markets. That's why I think RFK is not the early favorite.
Right. Now, if they did that, let's say they went to RFK, they would use the Dallas model, which is, stars over here, you got Frisco over here with the facility, and they build up around the practice facility. So they would do that in Loudoun County if they want to do that. And I think the other problem that I wonder about too is the area around there. And this is stuff that, you hear, like, it's just a different neighborhood than what the one they left. And there's more money there, which means more power to fight it. And I also think there's still going to be government hurdles, and there's going to be DC council, the city council hurdles. And then how do you split the money coming out of there? Is the owner getting, if the owner's not getting all the profits, like, you just spent all this money, you're spending money to also make money. It's not just to be benevolent here. So I think what you do is you try really hard to go down there, make it work, and then you're probably going to have to go somewhere else.
The reason the team's in Landover right now, not Virginia, is because they felt Jack felt the time crunch, felt he didn't have the time to get everything done in Virginia that he wanted to get done. That's an RFK problem too. Like, these guys are going to own the team for a long time, but man, everybody's antsy and itchy for that new stadium. 27 is the first time you can move in. Second preseason game is when you're eligible to move in 2027. They want to go, and RFK is not a go site. RFK is when Congress convenes next year, we're going to talk to Congress, and then the city council will convene, and then we'll take a vote, and then we'll break ground, and then we'll have some other obstacles. Like, it's a longer process. And that favors Virginia. It wasn't Virginia back in the day. I say Virginia, under the current governor, the current legislature, I think will greenlight whatever they need to clear some land, put a shovel in the ground, and get going right away. I think that's a real asset they have. And
that's a good point, because someone else, like, there are some sites that they know might not be ready till 2030, and a new owner is not going to wait that long, because this is your ability to make more on the team. And not just because it's not just about them making money, it's about the franchise making money. And when one of the things they have to do here that they did not do under Snyder, I think Bruce Allen was also cheap as hell because he was in charge of the purse strings when he was here, and he's gone for a few years, so it's no longer on him. But it was a cheap organization internally. And so I think you need to reinvest in the infrastructure of the organization to, I think, build a stronger one, not just the players, but I think people there, because you build loyalty, you build less resentment. because like people always wonder, like, why are there so many leaks? Because people are angry here. I mean, you know what I mean? So, and you're angry because like you're not taking care of them. And so, and then it's also like the technology, then you can take care of players and their families, blah, 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 all that stuff. It's all that stuff. That's why this stuff matters, because then you can reinvest it into what you need to make it work. If you're smart.
It's funny. I think in the Bruce Allen era, there was this thought of like, when we were players, we didn't have these, when the Allens were coaching, we didn't have these things. Players these days are spoiled and don't need these. Sure, you can think that. That's great. Think that all you want. It's not the reality. It's not true. We were chatting with Ryan Fitzpatrick in Phoenix, and we were laughing about that, the old AstroTurf field that's still out there. I mean, it's like, it's like the original AstroTurf. They're going to send that thing to the Smithsonian when they tear it down. There has been no attention.
I think it predates the Smithsonian. No, and
zero attention. No.
And the funny thing is, it's actually gotten better out there, but it's still not what it needs to be. But it's also like, when you have I know some scouts who left simply because like they just don't pay, or they didn't. I shouldn't say, because like what it's been the last couple of years, I know they raised a lot of things in there. So I don't want to put it on the current group, but it was like that. And so that's why I say when a new owner comes in, the reason why it's important to get to that point is so you can make sure that people are being taken care of there and that you're being paid accordingly. And, that's how you build a strong organization internally. And then you can do things for players and all that. Ultimately, on the player side, it still comes back to, can you find a quarterback?
One more thing I want to slide in before we move on to the next topic. A lot of people think the field at FedEx Field is still bad by reputation. It's actually good. Ron and Jason have put a lot of money into that. That actually is a much better place now. I think
and the practice fields are better too. And the practice fields are pretty good too. So they have done that lately. And, they're still like, and I think to their credit, and that's why I say like, I'm looking at previously, but also when a new group comes in, what do you need to do to do that? So yeah, so let's look at the roster. Where do you feel this roster is at? Because Ron has been very big on roster building. And when he says for the first time, like, you've had to do, what do you think?
Man, there were some head scratchers there. But what I caught from our time with Ron was he's going to identify quarterbacks like the 49ers, sign players like the Chiefs, and coach them up like the Bills. So I don't know, man. I don't know about you. I'm feeling good about this year. If you can make all that happen. This is a roster that. And I'll throw this back at you in a second, but this is not a Super Bowl roster. But last year, I said before the season, I don't think it's unfair to say that this group of players on paper should make the playoffs and should be contenders to make the playoffs. I don't think they've taken a step forward this offseason, but I don't think they've taken a step backwards this offseason. Sam Howell obviously is a big fat question mark. If Sam Howell doesn't pan out, he's not a playoff football team. But I think if Sam Howell gives you decent to good quarterback play, I don't think it's unfair to expect the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I think there is, the defense should still be good. That line should be really good. They still need a linebacker, but I love the safeties. I think that's a good group. I still think they're going to address the line in the draft. So that's pretty good there. You got the skill guys. And I do think some of those young tight ends will emerge. And it does come back. And Brian Robinson, like, I don't think people forget, but it's like you have to account for the fact that he was shot. He wasn't, even when he came back, it took a month or so, month and a half. Think about all this stuff. My goodness. But it took a good month and a half for you to get back to where you were, previously before getting shot. So what's he going to be like to start a season? Because he finished well. And so I do I'm agreeing with you. Like, I think if Howell plays pretty well, they should be able to contend for that. And the thing is, it's hard to know, like, have they surpassed these other teams in the East? Well, last year at this time, going into the season, nobody would have thought the Giants would have won 6 games. But how did they do it? And it was a smart offensive approach, and I think Dable did a nice job. And you still look at their talents, like, I still don't know how they did it, I don't. And
those two Giants games, I mean, to me, I think are very important to study because this team was better on paper in both of those games.
They should not have lost
that team won and tied both of those games. Yeah, that to me is potentially very telling.
Yeah, and I think the gamble here is, and I don't think Bieniemy is a gamble in and of itself, but going into your fourth year, a new system is a big switch. And going with a young quarterback, the combo of that is difficult. And I think that's why Brissett makes a lot of sense, because he's got a higher floor because, he's got the experience. He's coming off a good year and he's a true pro. But that is a roll of the dice because it's got to come together pretty quick. And when will it come together? And then you look at the schedule, you have a lot. On paper right now, what are we, March 31st, when we're recording this, it's harder than last year on paper. They don't play on paper, John. Yeah, thank you. I hear you. But it's true. Like, and I don't go by what it looks like now because it's all about then, but it still comes down to, like, there are a lot of things that have to go right. Will they all go right? But having said that, let's say he was in year 2 with where they're at right now. How would you assess this roster? Because somebody, whether it's Ron or someone else, will take over will have this roster next year. So do you like where this roster is headed? Forget year 4, but just in general, do you like where this roster is headed?
Yeah, I think it's a good collection of skilled players. I think, I love how they got younger at tight end last year. I think they brought in some young guys who will be contributors. I have major questions at linebacker, and I have major questions on the offensive line.
Yeah.
But find me an NFL team that doesn't have a weak position. I don't think there are any where you like circling about that's a bad contract. Like, I don't think this group has given out a lot of bad contracts. Now, if anything, you can accuse them of going the other way, not having enough, not trying enough for the splash contract, the big deal, whatever. But when Carson left, that was the last bad contract on this roster. I think as you line it all up here, 1 to 53, and go into this year, I think it's a lot of sensible investments in guys and some old guys who you'll need to move on from. But I think they've done a decent job of drafting so far, that you could say that's been one of their strengths.
Right. And again, I guess it all comes down to how.
It all comes down to, and it all comes down to Eric Bieniemy too. I mean, you say one, signing Eric Bieniemy was the right decision. It was. And 2, it might not go well. Both of those things can be true. It's possible this is a disaster.
And not necessarily because of him.
Yeah, right. There's so many reasons. Yes. And he's a first-year guy doing this with Sam Howell. Like, we're all excited about Eric Bieniemy. We're all excited about Sam Howell. But it's Eric Bieniemy plus Sam Howell. Correct. Question mark. Nobody knows what this is going to be.
Right. And again, like, the key for this year will be getting off to a good start which they haven't done. So I do believe, I think I believe they will have a joint practice. I think those are vital for this organization because I think one of the things they've been slow on is to identify who can do what for them going into the season. I think they've made mistakes each year because they don't get enough information based on how practices go. It'd be in part because of CBA, but also because the strategy toward preseason games. So I think that's one thing, but my concern would be that the offense is not going to be humming right away. It's just asking a lot for this group to go in there. And it could be that by the end of the year, it's pretty good because I do like a lot of Howell and I do think Bieniemy can make a difference. And if they had I think the bigger risk would have been bringing back what they had the first couple of years. If you go with Scott Turner's offense, that's a major risk because the players were no longer at all buying in, period. With Bieniemy, he brings the energy, he brings the hope. And again, it may not, here, I mean, shoot, we've seen good coordinators kind of struggle at times, but it's not all on him. But can you make it work right away and get off to the start you need? That means the defense has to really come through.
Yeah, and the offensive line is going to be an important part of this too.
Right.
Ron was very clear he wants joint practices. I think we both knew already that was something that was going to be seriously pursued. Also, after that third preseason game the last few years, Ron has taken his foot fully off the gas in those 2-3 weeks leading into the season. I am very curious if he does that again.
Yeah, and you have to examine everything because it hasn't worked well at the start. And you cannot, with a new owner, you cannot afford a slow start. And I don't, because, and you can dig out of it, but is 9-8 with a good finish going to get it done for you? I'm not taking that chance. Now, it may suggest good things for the future, but it doesn't mean good things for you personally. I don't know. We don't even know who the owner is, so we can't say that. But if if the other owner could look and say, listen, this is what you've done the last couple of years, why would I think it's going to be different? And that's the thing I would wonder about. And so but that's the thing, and I do think, I'm with you, Bieniemy was the right hire. I love the energy he brings. I think it's more than just calling a play here or there. There's so much more that goes into it that I think he can do well for this team. And I do think Howell can do well. It's just a matter of at what point does it all come together for them?
We learned that Eric Bieniemy starts every day with a 7:00 meeting for his staff. And I would just like to say, on behalf of myself, I'm glad I don't work for Eric Bieniemy.
Well, you know what I call 7 a.m.? Lunchtime.
Lunch.
Shout out Sam 48 if you're listening, which I doubt you are. Anyway, but yes, I just think there's a different energy with it, and I think that'll be good. So we'll see. Anyway, Michael, I appreciate you joining me, and hopefully all this stuff gets wrapped up soon so we can get back to some normalcy in our lives and everybody can start moving forward with everything. And I think that would be welcomed. So I appreciate your time.
Stadium season up next. You know that's my favorite. I'm ready for that. I think it'll be a fun draft. I think there's a lot to look forward to, but man, I am ready to be on the other side of this one.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to talk about a lot of other things that pertain to on the field and just keep moving forward with, hey, how are they going to do? Because the fun thing in the offseason is to speculate for 5 or 6 months. So there you go.
Exactly.
Thanks, Michael.
Take care.
As if the McCrispy couldn't get any better, Bacon and Ranch just entered the chat. The Bacon Ranch McCrispy, available at participating McDonald's for a limited time. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Michael for joining me, and thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back on Tuesday night / Wednesday morning with another episode. I'll talk to you next time.